Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting edition of Two Men in Black and White, an honest conversation. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Brock Ganeles, spending the last of his beautiful vacation days in beautiful Santa Fe. Hope you had good weather today, bud.
It rained again. It rained again, and it's not actually. I guess it's a sort of vacation. It's my wife's work trip that I tagged along on. I guess you'd call that a vacation.
Vacation. I'm Mark Hayes, located in ATS, shouting. All right, let's get right into it, bro. The first news item, Trump talking about 80% tariffs. Still, it's a non-starter. The words being thrown around today by financial experts were saying things like bankruptcy, financial disaster, right? Shutdown. Nobody can withstand an 80%. Basically, what amounts to a regressive tax.
Yeah, all the automakers were out complaining, saying it's crushing their business, and there's just a flood of anecdotes from many of which were, MAGAites and Trump voters, small business owners who are already wiped out, and we're only like a week or two into this. The tariffs haven't even kicked in yet in most cases, and they're already wiped out just on the prospect of how pricing changed in advance of the tariffs kicking in. So,
Right.
yeah, the economic damage is being done in real time.
Yeah, I saw a financial news report on YouTube earlier this morning. An elderly woman had ordered a wheelchair from China. By the time it got here, the price had doubled. It went from 3,000 to 6,000. What this administration, I mean, they're so fucking tone deaf. They don't even realize how they are hurting everyday American hardworking people just trying to make it.
Yeah, and if you can't if you need a component to be sourced from China or really anywhere as a key element of a product you're making, even if the rest of the product's made here in the US, you can't get that key element, you can't make the product. So like you can't just pull the rug out from under global supply chains overnight and not have a ton of collateral damage. It's just such an unsophisticated view of the world. But I did find it funny that you point out that Trump threw out 140% tariff, and then China just gave the silent treatment, right, for about a week, and he moved it down to 80%. So he's like negotiating against himself already. Pretty soon we're going to be paying China to send shit to us, right? It's just kind of an absurd lack of, skill set. But
Yeah.
the damage, like you said, the damage is happening anyway. It's comical, but it's damaging.
Right. I mean, the stupidity among the whole cohort is just Trump didn't even know what concessions are. He was asked in a, press gaggle, you willing to go make some concessions? Well, we're going to be friends with him. What are you talking about, dude?
Yeah.
Do you not understand what concessions are?
He doesn't
Are you
understand.
that dumb? Like, what are we dealing with?
He's that dumb. He's a moron, among other things. He is a moron. He doesn't know. He's never done global trade. So, yeah, he has no idea of the terms. He has no idea what he's talking about. And, yeah, he shows it day in and day out. But the fallout's happening anyway, right? I mean, he's already thrown the sand into the gears of global trade. And now every day there's negative outcomes, and it'll take a while to unwind, but we're not going to unwind this anytime soon because Trump will never admit a mistake. So we're going to just keep down this path, and he's just going to try to gaslight us all the way through and or blame Biden.
Right. And the thing about it is, you got these Chinese talks, the talks with Chinese folks coming up tomorrow in Switzerland. I don't think anything's going to happen there. Scott Besson is going there. I have about as much faith in him as I do, in a weather forecast for 2 weeks from now. I mean, this guy is just another one. All the best people. How do these people get rich? That's what I want to know. That's it.
A lot of getting rich is getting in the right seat when you're in Wall Street. That's one thing I learned that from the financial markets. If you get in the right seat, some people are brilliant and geniuses, but a lot of people are rolling along just being sort of right place, right time, old boys network, plugging into the right, a lot of it's timing. It doesn't mean they're good at everything. And some people are just good at one thing. Doesn't make them good at the next thing, right?
Right.
And that's a mistake commonly made, and people end up in jobs that they can't handle that are too sophisticated for their particular skill set, right? Like maybe I can nail a hammer and I'm just great at that, but you ask me to do the electricity, just because I can do this doesn't mean you want me wiring your house, right? And that's what, we end up doing is taking people who maybe were good at one thing and putting them in a different role, and they're out of their depth.
Yeah, and you take a look at this thing. Like, these people are so unrelatable to everyday
Yeah,
Americans.
common Americans. Yeah, it's
They have no idea. Like, I keep going back to Lutnick and as well, my grandmother's not going to complain about not getting her Social Security check. No, because jackass, you're going to send a private plane for her to pick her up and, take her to a beautiful steak dinner. Like, what are you talking about?
but it's that classic thinking that people can only see what's in their own
Right,
realm, right? The cone,
right,
tunnel vision, right? Just like, oh, I'm anti-LGBT. Now my daughter is a lesbian. Oh, well, now I see the whole thing differently. And oh, I've changed my tune. But no empathy for the other, can't connect to someone else's lived experience, only can see their own. And, that's kind of a one of America's cancers is that
right,
selfishness gene that seems to have, the toxic capitalism gene that has worked its way through society where people only relate to their own circumstance and can never get outside of themselves. And that's
right.
the worst thing for those people should not be in public service.
No, no.
Just it
None of
shouldn't
these,
be because the job is to think about everybody. Gets
everybody.
back to what we talked about yesterday with Wall saying that the government's not a business. It's not
Right,
about winning the day. It's not about the profitability of the balance sheet. It's about
right.
whether people are healthy and living good lives.
Right. And I've been thinking about that since you said that. The government is not, and now when I have that in my head and I listen to the day's headlines and see what's happening, I'm like, oh my God. Nothing has been more true and more profound than that simple statement, right? Because they're all transactional. None of them. I mean, there was a horrific story. Did you hear Bill Gates and his comments about Elon Musk and
Yeah, yeah,
ID? I mean, obviously Bill Gates, who pledged what 200 billion over the next 20 years to the cause, right, is going to get right in the trenches with USAID and get that money back. Apparently, he told the story of that hospital that prevents the transmission of HIV to babies, and now that money was snatched by the Doji Bros and Elon Musk, and he was horrified by it. And I believe I should have brought the quote with me, but I believe the quote was something like the world's richest man, pulling the funding and aiding in the death of the world's poorest children is not a good look.
yeah.
It was terrible, just
The
terrible.
only thing that I disagreed with Gates' comment on, of course, he's put so much money trying to eradicate malaria, trying to eradicate HIV. Like he's tried to work to, rid the world of the worst diseases. And in essence, what he thought were some of the, curable diseases
Right,
that were killing so many people. But
right.
the one thing I disagreed on Gates' statement is Gates was like, if only Elon Musk could go meet those children that were
Yes,
suffering. And my take was, doesn't matter if you would meet him. He has no empathy. Just like when Trump meets people who are suffering, he doesn't connect to the suffering. He just thinks suckers and losers,
right,
Darwinism, maybe they should die. Musk is missing that gene. He wouldn't connect to those poor people and change his thinking. He would probably just be like, especially if they're non-white, he'd probably just like be like, oh, well, just some people of color falling off the earth. And now that's a better balance for me in this utopian world I'm trying to create. So I think Gates was trying to impart on Musk some
right.
qualities that Musk doesn't have.
Right. And you know what? It takes me right back to Trump visiting Puerto Rico after the storm, and he's, swishing the paper towels to
Paper
the people
towels. Yeah, he couldn't connect to their pain, right?
at
He
all,
just,
at
it was
all.
just, it's just an awkward moment for him. He can't even as a human being,
Can't
you
even
know,
relate.
connect, can't relate.
Couldn't possibly relate, much less have a conversation. Other big news today. Wow. We're arresting public officials now. The mayor of Newark, New Jersey, one of the biggest, most populous city in New Jersey, arrested today after a tour of an ICE facility that apparently was not being built up to code. So the Congress folks and the mayor of Newark went out to take a look. They were accosted by mask wearing ICE officials. Need I say, fascism is here.
Yeah, fantastic. When we talk about needing action, right? This was the action moment of the day. Clearly broke through in the media and became sort of the highlight of the day. And I think just brings out, like you'd said, like this is anti-American, right?
Right.
This is not, I hope, 51% of America doesn't want this to be the country that they're living in, where you have these random detention centers that aren't even going to be held to a standard of what is the standard and quality of life for the people within those facilities. Look, you know firsthand already that incarceration in America is horrendous. My guess is these ICE facilities are even a level lower because they're just being slapped together. And any photos we've seen of them, they look pretty grim. So who has jurisdiction? Who has the power here? What can be done? And we got to see it behind the curtain of the economics of it too, because this was some, for-profit prison company cutting a major, what is it, $1.5 billion deal to build these facilities throughout the U.S. So you see how money's being made. I'm sure there's a nice kickback to Trump and the family along the way. And here we go. It's corruption, it's racism, xenophobia, it's fascism all rolled up into one. And I'm glad the nation got to see it and talk about it today.
Right. So this is a personal story in my household. Roz Baraka, the mayor of Newark, is a Howard University classmate of ours. And Roz has a history of activism. When we were in school, 1988, Howard University tried to appoint Lee Atwater, the architect of the Southern Strategy, right, who was caught on audio tape using the N-word rather freely. They tried to put him on our board of directors.
Why? By the way, why? What idea was that?
Well, this was the 80s now. This is the Bushes, right? This is post-Reagan. And this is to guarantee, right, the kind of education they thought we should be getting. So if you want the money to flow from the federal government, Howard University gets a lot of federal dollars, private institution. If you want the money to flow, do what we say. And we're going to appoint Mr. Atwater, right, who couldn't be a more unsavory character at the time, right, to your board of directors.
Yeah,
right?
which goes to show you that a lot of the things Trump and Project 2025 are doing, the seeds have been planted in this 50 years ago. It's not new, right? This is just, a different play, plays, basically, right?
Yeah. And the thing about it was, so we took over the A building. Students took over the A building. My wife was actually one of the students participating in the sit-in. I did not make it due to other previous engagements on the football field. But it was one of those kind of watershed moments. I learned about protesting at Howard University. My parents learned about it in the 60s in New York and Harlem, when the racial reckoning of the 60s was happening. Matter of fact, my parents had a really detailed scrapbook of a lot of the monumental civil rights movements from the 60s. And I used to bring it to school in first, second, third grade and do a little show and tell. And all my teachers allowed me to do it. But getting back to Roz, Roz was one of the student leaders in that event, has gone on to do amazing things in Newark. You got the Prudential Center, you've got student learning centers opening, crime is down. Matter of fact, I believe, and I got to check my research on this, but I think it was 2019 where police officers in Newark did not fire a single shot.
Wow.
So if you want to correct me in the comments what year that was, but I remember that as I used it in a presentation a couple of years back.
You were not surprised when you turned on the TV today and saw that he was being.
Not at all, because he cares. And he comes from a family of activists. His dad was poet laureate in New Jersey, a writer and activist, spoke through his words. I believe one of his poems was "Someone Blew Up America." So this is in his blood. This is what he does because he cares about his city and he cares about the people in it. And he's running for governor, right? So now here is the other aspect of this as it pertains to you and I, right? I understand there were some white public officials there who did not get cut. So that was what I saw in our alumni bulletin. Now, I haven't confirmed that yet.
Let's see. We'll have to look at that because I think that's going to be a very contested governor race.
Yes.
Interesting.
A lot of veterans in the field. right? And you have quite a few urban centers. You got Trenton, Camden, Newark, these different Willingboro and Central Jersey, Atlantic City on the coast. You got a lot of these urban centers that, might be starving for some African American leadership. So it'll be an interesting race. And this and his track record with what he's done in the biggest city in the state will give him a boost.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about the other opponents
But
and what their background.
I'm gonna argue more importantly. I mean, look, he's I mean, everyone has political ambition, so I'm never gonna question someone on that if they're in politics. But I feel like the action is bigger than what's going on for him locally, right? It's highlighting the atrocities of these ICE detention centers, and it puts like almost an exclamation point on all these other stories we've been getting of ICE raids in people's homes and the wrong people and targeting women and having like young teenage girls on the street in the rain while ICE in masks ransacks. And a good breakdown today of a woman, it got reposted on Blue Sky saying like, hey, don't you realize we're human beings? And like our first reaction when someone barrels into our house is that we're getting kidnapped. And I'm worried about my kids getting raped. And like, that's my, so my inclination is maybe to find a gun and to shoot. And that's where this is going to go to. And it was like a really heartfelt, like documentation of how this mother felt when ICE barreled into her home, and it's.
Yeah, again, and Brock, prison for profit is big money in the U.S., which is why I'm surprised they sent all these folks out of the country and they're paying, some foreign entity. And now they're talking about shipping folks off to Libya. So they must be just building these places because, again, this is not
Yeah,
new.
that's what I was thinking. We probably couldn't build them fast enough to do it in the, to hit the quotas that these.
Exactly. And if you look at the documentary 13th, you see how the Hispanic immigrants were targeted to incredible numbers and warehoused in these for-profit prisons, not given due process, no access to an attorney or legal representation. They're just literally being held, and all they are is big dollar signs stamped on their foreheads, right? Because the federal government is paying for every single body that's in there.
And Stephen Miller's out saying today that like maybe we have to suspend rights to do this fast enough, but this just gets us down to that same topic of like where's the line for the American people, right? Like when does it rile us up enough to watch this in our country and basically see rights eroded and and tactics that ultimately once again they're un-American, right? Like they're Gestapo tactics. Like this is suspending the rights of anyone in this country, citizen or non-citizen, is un-American. And certainly, how do we know if we're citizens unless there's been due process? So like it's chicken or egg thing. Like you can't just cart them out because you think they might not deserve rights. Everyone who's here has the rights, and that's what we've agreed upon as a people for 268 years, 270. I forget what the number is.
Well, remember, Donald Trump got due process in Georgia and then got the case thrown out when we heard him on the telephone call just asking the Secretary of State to find him enough votes to swing the election his way, right? He got due process. He got due process and was convicted of 34 felonies. He got due process and was adjudicated a rapist.
People of color not getting due process is not new here in America. It's just never been so overt, right? And just spoken and deemed quote proper by the government.
Right. Well, look at what happened up in Rochester.
In this vocal a way. Maybe it has underneath the hood, but usually there was at least some camouflage, right? Some bullshit.
Right. And look what happened in Rochester, Minnesota. People feel like they can use the N-word like this woman did and get rewarded for it, right? She's a savior of the right-wing white supremacist movement. This woman's raised what, $700,000, $800,000. And people, if you go and look at the comments on the religious themed website that she is using to collect the funds, Brock, the comments are horrific. horrific. Everything you would expect to see on a white supremacist site. Under the angels, right? With pictures of angels and wings and Bible verses, right? So this what? So you're using your Christian website and Christian values to help an admitted rapist and racist and white supremacist collect funds so she can protect herself and her free speech? What? You have the right to free speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. All right? You have the right to, and this was a Somali born immigrant child. You know how the Somalis ended up in the state of Minnesota, right? You're wondering, how did all these African, origin people end up in, the coldest place in America, arguably, right? Through the church, right? And through the missions of the church. There's a huge Somali population in, the Minnesota area,
Mhm,
especially down around the Twin Cities. And
mhm,
so I'm not surprised they're making their way to Rochester and other locations around the state as
mhm.
they get jobs, as they get degrees, as they get older, and or as they try to find affordable housing, right? And so this is the way these folks are being treated now because they just see them as black, right? They just see them as brown. They don't see them as human beings. This was a 5-year-old kid, and the reward was, let me raise $1 million just so I can find protection.
Yeah, and supposedly this kid was stealing something or whatever on a playground. I mean, the story
Right.
is absurd, but this is where MAGA is. Trump unleashed MAGA to be as racist and sexist and xenophobic and homophobic as they've always wanted to be. Right? He's the perfect reflection of the worst of America, and he's got that animal sense to play right into that. It's not a new, like we just talked about. It's not a new playbook. Different players, different playing, same playing field, slightly different playbook,
Right.
and it's where we are, right? It's why we're that's why we're in this bubbling civil war.
Right.
My take though is that the Project 2025 side is winning. They have
Right.
the power and they're unraveling the best of America to
Right.
impart their white Christo fascist version of this country where racists can raise 700K within a couple of weeks just by
Right.
being racist on TikTok or becoming a famous racist, right? It's like
Right.
a new version of reality star, right?
Right.
What is her profession? She's a famous racist. That's how she
Right.
makes her money, right? That's what she's going to
Exactly.
write on her IRS form, right? How'd you make your money
Right.
last year? Oh, I'm a famous
Right.
racist.
Right. And the thing about it was there was also a comment there that was the person had donated $1,488. And the TikToker had broken it down. The 1 and the 4 represented 2 letters in the alphabet that the white supremacists relate to. The 8 and the 8 related to 2 H's. I was so disgusted that he was able to,
Oh, that's like a
decipher.
Heil Hitler. That's a Nazi
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, there's
yeah,
so many codes I can't keep
yeah,
up with.
right. And so, I was so disgusted, that someone would take the trouble, to donate $1,488, right? And then the comment was just, okay, like, okay, now I understand, why this person sent that amount of money. But, this is more of the emboldening, more of the empowerment, more winning, right, by the Christo-fascist right. And then when you look at the Cincinnati case with Rodney Hinton, I'm seeing debates on Facebook of like, an eye for an eye because the officer that was killed by Rodney Hinton was not the one who took his son's life, right? And so then you saw the show of force in the courtroom with all these, Hamilton County Sheriff's deputies and, them, really trying to intimidate this man. And he was like, I don't care. And people are saying, well, now let's look at this a little closer. That's where we've come. That's how far we've sunken. And and here I am considering myself a rational human being, and I'm finding myself getting caught up in these arguments saying, well, that's a good point. Like how are we making good points, right, for someone mowing down a police officer? Right? Like I had to catch myself from no, I can't go there.
Yeah, I'm
Right?
not on board with it, but you understand it, right? You can understand the rage, the grief combined with the rage, and
Right.
people, act quote outside of themselves, right? It's not. I mean, it could be any of us.
Yep. You're right.
in a certain circumstance, it could be any of us. We all have that in us,
Yep.
and to do something that rash when we've been hurt and lost someone and feel like something's been taken from us. I mean, I don't have kids, you do. A child's taken from you and you feel like someone killed your child in cold blood. Like, it takes a lot of self-restraint to not react
Yeah.
back with violence, right? It's kind of it's hard not to, right? Violence begets violence, right? India and Pakistan, one person shoots the other, another shoots the other, and here we go. We have a
Yep.
war. Like,
Yep.
who's gonna cool it down? Now everyone has somebody that's been killed, that's family,
Right.
friends, loved ones, and there they go. I mean, it's human nature.
Yeah, and Cincinnati is got a well documented history of racial tension. When I was working there, what 16, 17, 15, 16, 17, the end of 14. I mean, they were talking about the riots from 2000 that had not really been smoothed over. There were still remnants and still a racial reckoning to be had
Yeah.
from the early 2000s, from those riots and those conflicts. So,
Where isn't there racial tension? I mean, when you dig down a layer deeper, like, it's everywhere. It was Minneapolis with George Floyd. You figure that was it's a blue state and a very progressive state, progressive governor, progressive mayor, but it didn't matter. Down at the street level, there was the racial tensions. It's interesting we're on this topic. I was thinking about that. I was walking around Santa Fe today. I just walked around a little bit and got out, and I was like, and I was looking at all these shops, right? And they're selling, everything here is art, a lot of art,
right,
a lot of sculpture, and a lot of Native American art, but
right,
also a lot of art from like the cowboys and trolleys and all that of the white
all the good stuff.
settlers coming west, right? So it's already called New Mexico, right? Because there's already wars between Mexico and the U.S. But then I'm like, have these two groups really reconciled the fact that one of them came out here and kind of basically massacred the other, right? And now everyone lives together,
Now
but
it's
is there
celebrated.
like harmony? But is the tension like just a layer deeper? And like, how do you ever, Native Americans, can they ever forgive that? But it's just weird when you walk by like all these art galleries and you have one photo of a Native American art and you got another one of like a cowboy with the gun over on his shoulder. It's like, well, who was he shooting? He was shooting
Right.
American in the picture that's sitting right next to each other in the art gallery. Beautiful art,
Yep.
but like, wow, like, we're really just documenting conflict. So when you said in Cincinnati a racial reckoning, I'm like, fucking every city in America, every city, town, no matter where you
Yep.
go, we haven't had a national racial reckoning.
No, no. And it seems like we're afraid to.
We're afraid.
You think about, yeah, you think about OJ, you think about Rodney King, you think about all the just insane incidents that have happened. I don't know if you remember Lee Boyd Malvo and what was the other guy's name? Gosh, I can't think of it, but they were driving around Washington, D.C., shooting people out of the trunk of the
Yeah,
car.
yeah. The older guy and the young kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just think about, the kinds of just incredibly heinous acts that we've dealt with, from serial killers to school shootings, and we still haven't tried, to get some of the really remarkable people from all of our communities to sit down at a table together,
It has
right?
to happen now with MAGA. I mean, the pendulum has moved so far that we basically have a group of people that want to have like a cleansing of America, right?
Right,
And create this
right,
white supremacist utopia that they've written about, that these tech guys think they can turn the country into. And you get this South African guy over here with all his money who's kind of bought his way into the system, and he's executing this Project 2025 playbook that Lee Atwaters of the world have wanted their
right,
whole lives, and the Southern
right,
strategy. So the reckoning is happening now. It's just happening with the white supremacist movement, and there's really just no
right,
counter movement against it,
right,
which is why it keeps marching down the field, to use the football analogy, right? It keeps marching down the field. Some days it gets 5 yards, some days it only gets a yard, but it's not being pushed backwards yet,
right.
which gets me to beyond race, to my topic that I think I'm going to talk about every day till we get to it, is like, how in the fuck are the American people going to allow Trump to have a military parade in Washington, D.C. on June 14th? How are we going to allow that spectacle to happen? How are we going to allow him to flex his muscles and say, I'm in charge of this military and we're implementing this white supremacy Project 2025 social hierarchy into America, and you're all going to sit here and watch it on TV and watch it happen when all it requires is for us to all show up and fucking rob and just be there. Bodies in the streets. They sent out the parade route today. Now everyone knows they got the permits.
Now we know what it is.
Knows exactly what the route is. What are they going to do? How are they going to stop millions of people from flooding those streets and just sitting there in the street, millions of people, so that parade doesn't happen? How could we possibly let that parade happen? And what's Trump going to be there waving like he's like Kim Jong-un? Like, you know, he's just pissed because Putin just pulled off a military parade and all his fucking other dictators can do it. But how are we going to sit here? You know, how are we going to sit there and allow that to happen?
It's supposed to be better than that. All right, that's our marching orders moving forward. Get everybody to D.C. on Barack Obama Appreciation Day. We're going to D.C.
Absolutely. Everyone can carry those. What are those faces they have, like the, you know, sporting events or whatever? You know, but we can have our big Barack Obama hats just sitting there, right? We're going to have Barack Obama masks. Hey, we can all be masked like ice with a Barack Obama mask that we're all wearing. No one will know who we are because we don't have to identify ourselves in America anymore.
Exactly. All right, bro. Have a safe trip home. We'll catch you on the flip side.
Yeah, we might have to take tomorrow off. I might be driving through red country tomorrow, so wish me luck with my Rhode Island plates as I go through Texas and Oklahoma tomorrow. Is maybe a little bit of Missouri.
Yeah. Wind that thing down, baby. Wind that thing down.
I'm going to have to tuck my Bernie Sanders t-shirt deep into my bag in case they rifle through it. All right. So maybe we'll reconvene on Sunday, but we'll have a lot to talk about by then, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Travel safe.
All right. Good stuff. Thanks, Mark.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Peace.